They called it a war, but there were rules, codes written into treaties, encoded in interstellar law, signed with symbols of unity. Every species that claimed to be civilized honored them. Even in battle, even among enemies, prisoners were to be treated with dignity. Humanity followed these laws. When alien captives fell into Terran hands, they were given shelter, medical aid, and the right to live. The Zeraki, however, saw such decency as weakness. To them, humans were an aberration, flesh too soft, empathy too dangerous. When the 12th Terran fleet fell in the Dravos sector, 3,012 human soldiers were captured. The last transmission was a distress beacon from the command cruiser Ardent Sky, blinking in and out as hostile ships surrounded it. Earth tracked their signal to a prison complex on Carthon 4, a mining moon deep within Zeraki-controlled space. No formal communication followed. No negotiations. Only silence. Then came the broadcast. No encryption. No warning. Every major channel across human space was overridden simultaneously. Families in homes. Children in schools. Soldiers in bunkers. It played everywhere. The screen showed rows of kneeling prisoners, blindfolded, hands bound. A Zeraki officer narrated in a garbled, cold tone, accusing humanity of corrupting the galactic order. Then came the executions, systematic, mechanical, inhumane. 3,000 lives, extinguished in under 7 minutes. Humanity didn't respond immediately. For 3 hours, the Earth Council remained silent. No statements. No commands. Just shock. The footage was scrubbed from official records, but it didn't matter. Every citizen had already seen it. The silence gave way to something deeper, an ancient, ancestral fury buried beneath generations of diplomacy. By the 4th hour, the Terran Assembly convened. Delegates from Mars, Europa, Luna, and Earth stood united. One retired general, now a civilian representative, spoke only one sentence. They slaughtered our sons and daughters like cattle and called it justice. The Galactic Council issued no condemnation. No sanctions. They claimed the broadcast could have been fabricated. The Zeraki ambassador called it propaganda misinterpreted by emotional primates. When Terran diplomats demanded answers, they were met with procedural delays and bureaucratic shrugs. The message was clear. Justice would not come from the stars. Earth had suffered losses before, but this was different. It wasn't the number. It was the intent. This wasn't war, it was a performance meant to humiliate, to fracture the human spirit. Instead, it did the opposite. Across Earth's megacities and orbital habitats, citizens began sending messages to enlist. Recruitment stations overflowed. Old veterans returned to command rooms. Factory lines were converted overnight. Civilian fleets were stripped down and rebuilt with armor. Colonies lit up with encrypted war traffic. For the first time in 2 centuries, humanity prepared not to defend, but to retaliate. The media didn't need to stir outrage. It was already boiling. Artists painted murals of the executed, not as victims, but as martyrs. AI networks shifted resources to military logistics without being prompted. One silent directive pulsed through every node in human space: respond. Strategists pulled up old files on total war scenarios, tactics humanity swore they would never use again. Ethical codes were reviewed. Doctrines updated. Military AI were activated with failsafes removed. The policy of restraint that once defined Terran warfare was marked obsolete. The Earth Council voted unanimously: humanity would declare total war. Not symbolic conflict. Not territorial gain. Not proportional response. This was no longer about strategic advantage, it was about moral reckoning. Before the declaration was transmitted, a private message was sent to the families of the massacred. It said, "Their names are known. Their deaths will be answered. Not with mercy, not with treaties, but with consequence." By the time Earth officially declared war, the galaxy had already felt the shift. It wasn't the words that mattered. It was the silence behind them. The kind of silence that only comes before a storm meant not to destroy, but to remind. They killed human prisoners to prove a point. But all they did was show humanity what the price of hesitation truly was. And from that moment on, there would be none. Within hours of the declaration, Earth's infrastructure shifted with mechanical precision. Civilian industries converted without hesitation. Commercial shipyards halted luxury cruiser production and began crafting warships designed for devastation, not aesthetics. Manufacturing centers on Mars rerouted supply chains to prioritize kinetic weapons and quantum shielding. Entire orbital rings were reprogrammed to assemble vessels at unprecedented speed. The transformation was total, immediate, and unstoppable. No draft orders were needed. Humanity's rage filled every recruitment office. Volunteers flooded in from colony worlds, orbital habitats, and deep space mining rigs. It wasn't patriotic fervor, it was personal. Everyone knew someone on that list of the executed. There were no politics left, no debates, only action. Former rivals stood shoulder to shoulder. Earthborn and Martian, stationer and colonist, all boundaries dissolved. The unity was not spoken. It was absolute. AI constructs that once managed agriculture and traffic were redirected to war logistics. Predictive models ran simulations millions of times per second, optimizing deployment paths, rationing, and material conversion. Fusion plants across Jupiter's moons powered up to maximum capacity, fueling assembly lines that would not stop for sleep or negotiation. Time became the enemy, and humanity refused to lose another second. The Terran fleet, scattered across multiple theaters before the incident, received encrypted pulses. Their orders were simple: return and prepare. The first wave arrived at Saturn's defense rings within 2 days. What came back was not a fleet of disparate commands but a single entity, coordinated, refitted, and unified under a command structure that had purged hesitation from its doctrine. Command centers beneath the Pacific Ocean and on the dark side of Luna activated dormant protocols. These systems, designed decades ago for extinction-level scenarios, were refined overnight by adaptive learning cores. Operation Forge, once theoretical, now moved forward as fact. Deep Black research divisions were given full access to their containment labs. No longer restricted by ethical hesitation, experimental propulsion, weaponization, and infiltration technologies were unleashed. On Earth, major cities became logistics hubs. Civilian airways transformed into supply lines. Subterranean maglev trains rerouted to deliver antimatter cores, weaponized drones, and armor suits. No corner of humanity's infrastructure was spared. Even entertainment networks were repurposed to broadcast training simulations, threat recognition systems, and mission briefings. The shift wasn't propaganda, it was preparation. Colonies in the outer belt initiated Operation Ember, a covert plan built for long-term attrition. Mining stations were outfitted with camouflage plating and long-range railguns. Every outpost became a forward base. Sleeper agents within Zeraki-aligned systems activated. Human-built AI embedded in foreign networks began quietly gathering data, fleet paths, supply chains, diplomatic signals, without leaving a trace. Terran scientists cracked the Zeraki communication lattice using a hybrid of linguistic mapping and neural mimicry. Within hours, human fleets could listen in on enemy strategy in real time. Every intercepted message was catalogued, every hesitation logged. While the enemy operated on bureaucratic delay, humanity adapted faster than they could comprehend. Quantum relays stretched from Earth to the edge of explored space, enabling command latency to drop near zero. Orders issued in Geneva executed in Neptune's orbit within microseconds. Fleet cohesion reached levels unseen by any other species. Human vessels moved like limbs of a single body, guided not by generals alone, but by synchronized AI calibrated to human instinct and emotion. Simultaneously, humanity prepared for planetary defense. Orbital platforms were retrofitted with counter-invasion systems. Civilian shelters transformed into hardened bunkers. Not out of fear, but to eliminate vulnerability. Earth would not be caught off guard again. Every child knew evacuation routes. Every adult knew their role. Civilian participation wasn't requested. It was understood. Diplomatic channels remained open, but only for one message. "We are coming." No embellishment. No threats. The silence behind the words carried more weight than any declaration. What had been fractured by politics, scarred by history, and limited by fear, had coalesced into something new. Humanity had become singular in purpose, relentless in execution, and unyielding in will. The galaxy expected grief. Instead, it witnessed resolve forged from pain and sharpened into retribution. There was no ceremony. No spectacle. Just action at a scale no alien species had ever imagined humanity capable of. The old perception of humans, as chaotic, emotional, fragmented, was gone. In its place stood a machine wrapped in flesh, driven not by hatred, but by memory. And that made it unstoppable. The first strike came without warning. No build-up, no ultimatum, just obliteration. A Zeraki military outpost on the edge of the Thalek corridor ceased to exist within seconds. Not bombed. Not overrun. Erased. Kinetic rods traveling at hypersonic velocity turned the atmosphere into fire. Debris didn't fall, it vaporized. The message was delivered through action alone, no negotiation, no mercy, no delay. Zeraki forces mobilized, expecting traditional patterns. They found none. Human fleets didn't move in formation. They split, rejoined, vanished, and reappeared where no enemy predicted. Their navigation systems defied known algorithms, using real-time spatial distortion tactics foreign to Zeraki military logic. Patrol fleets sent to intercept never made it back. No wreckage. No survivors. Just silence. Drones led every assault, but they weren't simple machines. They adapted mid-engagement, forming new battle strategies with each passing second. Enemy jammers failed. Decoys were bypassed. Electronic countermeasures meant nothing against drones that rewrote their own code on the fly. They swarmed without hesitation, targeting engines, command decks, life support systems. Not one wasted shot. On the diplomatic front, human operatives released a data packet across neutral channels. It contained every name, every serial number, every last detail of the massacred prisoners. Attached was unfiltered footage. The message was brief. This is why. Worlds that once stood indifferent turned quiet. Not out of guilt, but fear. Zeraki command structures fractured. Their generals, trained for calculated offensives, weren't prepared for the chaos. Human AI anticipated every move before it happened. Ambushes were counter-ambushed. Evacuations intercepted. Weapon caches detonated remotely without human presence. Every weakness was exploited with surgical precision. Human vessels weren't elegant. They were massive, angular, and brutal, floating platforms of focused destruction. Each ship deployed orbital bombardment systems that bypassed planetary defenses through gravitational lensing. Cities melted before alarms could sound. Infrastructure crumbled under pressure waves. Zeraki civilians, once proud of their military dominance, fled in panic. Not a single human foot touched ground. It wasn't conquest. It was punishment. Psychological warfare followed. Reprogrammed satellites broadcast the Zeraki's own massacre footage across their colonies, looping endlessly. Propaganda centers collapsed from riots. Local governors lost control. Entire systems went dark, not from physical assault, but from mass desertion and civil unrest. The enemy imploded without a single invasion. Human cyber units infiltrated their command networks. Not to disable, but to expose. War orders, execution authorizations, and internal communications were leaked across the galaxy. The Zeraki couldn't hide behind bureaucracy anymore. Their guilt was undeniable. Their isolation became total. Terran strategists ignored traditional occupation doctrine. Instead, they deployed orbital printers to create temporary forward bases within hours. They didn't hold territory. They devastated and moved on. Every target struck was selected for maximum impact with minimum effort. Military academies, research hubs, and logistical centers were prioritized. No ceremony. No grand battles. Just results. Within days, over 20 Zeraki colonies had lost communications, trade, and defense. Their empires shrank inwards, trying to regroup. Humanity didn't allow it. Warp disruption mines locked down hyperspace lanes. Refugee convoys vanished. Supply ships were hijacked, stripped, and redirected. Each setback pushed the enemy further into collapse. Commanders within the Zeraki hierarchy began surrendering independently, trying to bargain their safety. Humanity didn't respond. Not with words. Those who surrendered were marked and monitored but left untouched. Their systems became living examples, visible to all, left in ruin, but spared annihilation. No one misunderstood the reason. The Galactic Council watched in growing dread. A new power had emerged, one that didn't posture or grandstand. It simply acted. Where others debated, humanity executed. Where others hesitated, humanity advanced. Every moment wasted by their enemies became an opportunity for humans to strike deeper. Zeraki morale collapsed. Their once feared navy now fled from human signal pings. Skirmishes became routes. Admirals refused deployment. Cadets refused conscription. The chain of command disintegrated under the pressure of pure, calculated destruction. Humanity had no desire for territory. Their only goal was submission. Not through treaties, but through total strategic dominance. By the time the Zeraki leadership requested peace, their empire no longer existed in any meaningful form. No capital. No fleet. Just remnants scattered across broken stars. Their plea reached Earth encrypted, desperate, almost incoherent. The reply was a single line. Peace is not requested. It is earned. While the Zeraki collapsed, other species watched in silence, weighing consequences. Some hoped to remain neutral. Others sent veiled messages of concern, not condemnation. But their silence during the massacre hadn't been forgotten. Humanity had taken notes. Files once locked in diplomatic archives were decrypted and released publicly. Transcripts, surveillance captures, intercepted calls. Evidence showed several Galactic Council members had prior knowledge of the Zeraki's intent. Not one had intervened. That betrayal wasn't overlooked. It was documented, catalogued, and prepared for response. Humanity didn't need to speak. Their embargoes did the talking. Quantum trade gates, operated primarily by human-engineered technology, shut down. Galactic commerce, reliant on Terran logistics and energy crystals, halted instantly. Dozens of core systems, once economically thriving, found themselves disconnected from vital supply chains. Terraforming halted. Medicine shipments froze. Defense contracts defaulted. Artificial suns dimmed without warning. Panic spread faster than war. Economies collapsed within days. Civil unrest followed. Protests erupted on Council-aligned planets, not in solidarity with humans, but in fear of being next. Old alliances crumbled under pressure. Former allies turned on each other to escape implication. The Council, once a symbol of unity, fractured under its own weight. Humanity hadn't fired on them, but their message was unmistakable: your silence was complicity. Terran AI networks fed real-time surveillance into public feeds. Images of council leaders stalling votes on war crimes, attending banquets while prisoners died, flashed across every human and neutral channel. No edits. No commentary. Just truth, displayed without filter. Billions viewed the evidence. Billions changed their minds. A new structure emerged, not built on tradition, but on response. The Terran Accord was introduced across diplomatic networks. A parallel council, transparent, decentralized, and bound by enforced consequence. Its founding members were planets and systems that had opposed the massacre from the beginning or refused to support the Zeraki war machine. Each had a verified record of dissent. Humanity didn't demand loyalty. It offered structure to those who deserved it. The rules were simple: protection for those who protect justice, and isolation for those who enabled atrocity. No species was forced to join. But those who did received Terran protection, restored trade access, and AI governance tools generations ahead of galactic norms. Worlds began signing instantly. Not out of fear, but opportunity. They'd seen what humanity could destroy. Now they understood what it could build. Zeraki remnants, seeking to escape collapse, attempted to regroup through proxy states. Their fleets were intercepted, their hidden bunkers exposed. Not by warships, but by informants within their own ranks. Disillusioned officers began leaking information to human command, trading intelligence for survival. Loyalty vanished under pressure. What once was an empire became scattered fragments, infighting over scraps. Humanity remained silent throughout. No victory parades. No speeches. They weren't building an empire of celebration. They were designing a framework of accountability. Rebuilding was permitted, but only for those who acknowledged guilt and submitted to judgment. Several Zeraki colony leaders surrendered autonomously, issuing formal apologies and ceding all authority to the Accord. Humanity did not occupy their worlds. They sent auditors and architects instead. The Council demanded negotiations, hoping to contain the fallout. Their message received no reply. When they tried to summon humanity formally, they were met with a return signal. Authority revoked. Diplomatic embassies were shuttered. Council representatives found their clearances void. Terran diplomatic AI denied entry to their comms channels. Sanctioned species saw their ships blocked from every major hyperlane. No threats. Just systematic closure. The era of discussion had ended. Consequence had replaced conversation. One by one, Council worlds began defecting. Not from loyalty, but from necessity. They saw the momentum. They saw the collapse coming. And they chose survival. Species once proud of their neutrality now begged for inclusion in the Accord. Each request was reviewed. Not all were accepted. Forgiveness, like power, was no longer distributed without merit. Humanity hadn't overthrown the Council with weapons. It had dismantled them with exposure, strategy, and the brutal clarity of justice. There was no new empire flying Terran banners. No singular capital to destroy. Humanity had become a distributed force, rooted not in conquest, but in unyielding memory. The message to the galaxy was final. Order would no longer be dictated by those who watched evil pass. It would be enforced by those who remembered what silence cost. The war didn't end with signatures. There was no formal surrender, no ceremonial broadcast. It ended when resistance ceased to exist. Zeraki systems went dark, their fleets disbanded, their leadership scattered or erased. What remained was a husk of power, stripped of command, consumed by internal collapse. Humanity didn't claim ownership. They didn't install governors or raise flags. They left ruins behind and moved forward, offering no explanation. Earth held no celebrations. Victory was not framed as triumph, but as obligation fulfilled. The names of the slaughtered prisoners were etched into a silent archive, accessible to every citizen across human space. Not listed alphabetically, but by the last message they ever sent. Each one preserved. Each one played yearly, not as propaganda, but remembrance. They weren't forgotten. They were the reason humanity never paused again. The systems that had joined the Accord quickly adopted Terran protocols. Not out of coercion, but because they worked. Corruption dropped. Logistics stabilized. Conflict zones calmed under the presence of autonomous mediation platforms designed to prevent escalation before it sparked. Humanity didn't extend dominance, they offered functionality. Those who abused power before now faced consequence in real time. Artificial oversight replaced bureaucracy. Delays vanished. Accountability became instant. Back on Earth, life resumed without noise. The infrastructure remained efficient. Military networks returned to low-power standby. Civilian programs resumed funding. Research stations reopened. But the core systems, those forged in the heat of retaliation, remained dormant, untouched, but never dismantled. They served as a quiet reminder of what had been triggered, and what could return. Children across human space were not taught that humans had won. They were taught why action was necessary. Not once was revenge romanticized. The footage of the war, the decisions made, the lives lost, they were preserved, but not glorified. Education focused on pattern recognition, signs of moral failure, indicators of systemic collapse. The message was clear: what was done must never be required again. The families of the executed never received compensation. They received clarity. Every detail of their loved one's fate was delivered, fully unredacted, with personal letters written by human command. No words of comfort. Only truth. Every officer involved in delaying the initial rescue efforts had already resigned or been removed. Responsibility didn't vanish in war. It became law. A single monument was built, not on Earth, but on the desolate moon where the massacre occurred. It stood without plaque or explanation. A simple human figure, bound but standing, facing the stars. The design came not from government, but from survivors of past wars who understood that silence speaks louder than steel. No visitors were permitted. It wasn't a site for mourning. It was a marker, for those who still believed the galaxy had rules. The Zeraki species was not exterminated. Those who surrendered were left in isolation, systems marked, their calms monitored but not restricted. No trade. No aid. No attacks. They were left to rebuild or wither on their own terms. Their memory preserved, not in hate, but in warning. The Terran Accord expanded slowly. Systems joined carefully, vetted not just for strategic value, but for integrity. No promises were made beyond one: justice would be absolute. Across those systems, war became rare. Not because threats vanished, but because consequences arrived faster than ambition could fester. Humanity did not declare itself ruler. It simply made the cost of cruelty unaffordable. What remained was balance. Not enforced by dominance, but by memory. Not all species agreed with the methods. Many feared them. But none denied their effectiveness. The message that echoed across space, unspoken but understood, was final: when others failed, humans acted. And once they act, they do not stop until the lesson is written in history itself. Peace returned, not because humans asked for it, but because the galaxy could not afford to provoke them again. Not out of fear of destruction, but out of certainty that justice would follow. Unrelenting, impartial, and unforgettable.